an accused killer audibly crying in the courtroom. Prosecutors say he shot and killed his wife when he found someone else's jacket in his bedroom.
The facts are that just after 8:30 in the morning on Saturday, May 24th, the police received a call for a person having been shot.
We're hearing from a Boston reporter who was in the courtroom as tears were shed. This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Gillespie. It's not uncommon to see emotions in the courtroom, especially in the type of cases that we cover. I mean, it's sex crimes, abuse, murder, they're all really emotional things. But for the most part, you usually see victims or survivors' crime, maybe sometimes even family members. But rarely do you see a defendant accused of killing someone crying at the initial appearance. But that's just what happened this week in Boston.
May 13th was the last day.
That's the moaning of 58-year-old Sean Brewer, the Massachusetts man accused of killing his wife, Jacklyn, over the weekend. Today's Scandal takes us to Winthrop, Massachusetts. That's a city just northeast of Boston, and that's home to Sean and his wife, 47-year-old Jacklyn, who goes by Jacklyn Berry. And according to what Sean's defense attorney told CBS Boston, the couple were newly and happily married, but over the weekend, police were called to their apartment when gunshots rang out.
The facts are that just after 8:30 in the morning on Saturday, May 24th, the police received a call for a person having been shot. When police responded, they found 47-year-old Jacklyn Berry in her bed, suffering from a gunshot wound. Her husband, the defendant before the court, Sean Brewer, was in the house when the police arrived. He claimed to the police that that morning he was sweeping his bedroom before church when he found items in his and his wife's bedroom that did not belong to him, including a jacket with a firearm in the pocket. He indicated he took the firearm out to ask Ms. Berry about it. He indicated he didn't touch the trigger, and the firearm just spontaneously went off, striking Ms. Berry.
Let me pause here really quickly just to note that as the prosecutor is explaining to the court what allegedly happened, you can see Sean actually beginning to cry. And we've got it all right there on camera. And we'll actually be hearing from a CBS Boston reporter who was in the courtroom at the time during today's interview. But first, what prosecutors say happened. They allege that on Sunday morning, Sean was in his bedroom before heading off to church. And that's when he allegedly found some items that weren't his, a jacket and a gun. Now, it's not clear whose items these were. Prosecutors didn't speculate as to whether they belonged to another man or if there was an alleged affair in the mix, but what they do say is that the gun went off. Jackie was shot as she lay in bed.
A search warrant conducted at the apartment did lead to the recovery of 40 caliber Smith & Wesson firearm and one discharged cartridge, or spent cartridge casing. Ms. Berry was pronounced deceased, and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner determined the cause of her death was gunshot.
Sean Brewer is now charged with manslaughter in Jackie's death. Now, this video is from the arraignment held yesterday in Boston Municipal Court. And in the hearing, prosecutors were quick to highlight some of Sean's past offenses.
In addition to those facts, the defendant's criminal record is a basis for the Commonwealth's request for a $100,000 bail. He has a lengthy criminal record with numerous convictions, including crimes of violence and drug offenses. Additionally, he does have a pending case in the Central Division of the Boston Municipal Court for assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, assault and battery on a police officer, and resisting arrest. So the Commonwealth is moving to revoke on that. Given the facts and the defendant's record, I would ask the court to impose the Commonwealth's requested $100,000 bail, revoke the defendant's bail, and order that he stay away from 26 Beacon Street and have no contact with any other.
According to CBS Boston, bail was revoked for Sean on that other pending case, but was set at a hefty number for the alleged manslaughter. Here's the case's judge.
I'm going to set the bail as the Commonwealth requested for $100,000. Stay away from the location and no contact with the residents who are at that location. That doesn't apply to counsel, obviously.
I've got to again note that in that soundbite, you can't see Sean because he's literally covering his face. But in this next clip, as counsel discusses bail and, future court dates, you can audibly hear him crying.
Bail revocation warning for docket number 2401, CR 2100. So I will revoke the bail. Did you want to be heard on that? Okay. So that would be a 60-day revocation? And what would the date from that be? And we will bring him back, or have him sent back to Central for 30-day days. Does he already have a date in Central?
I can check this one over.
Yeah, I'm going to check the docket that you gave me. May 13th was the last date. Oh, June 17th for trial. So we'll just make that as part of the order, okay? Okay. The 17th of June.
Here's how the hearing wrapped.
Your bail has been imposed in the amount of $100,000 with the conditions of staying away from the location and having no contact with the residents of the location. Please be advised that if you violate conditions of your release or contract with any other crime while this case is pending, your bail could be revoked and you could be held up to 90 days in custody without bail.
And the very last clip that we have is of Sean literally covering up his face and once again crying.
Commonwealth's motion to impound was heard and allowed by agreement, and Commonwealth's motion to revoke defendant's bail has been allowed.
That's where the hearing ended, but not where the story ends. CBS Boston reporter Louisa Moller was in the courtroom for all of that, but also outside of the courtroom after, where Sean's defense attorney spoke. And according to Louisa's reporting, the defense claimed that Jackie's dying words prove this was an accidental shooting. What those words were remain unclear, and whether Sean was the only witness also remains unclear. The defense also says they're not sure whose belongings Sean found in the bedroom because remember, he allegedly found this jacket and a gun, and we still don't know who they belong to. So there's still a lot of questions here, as prosecutors pointed out. We still don't even have the cause of death for Jackie. But the bottom line here is a life was cut short. Her family also spoke to CBS Boston, and they said, quote, Jackie was sweet, loyal, loving, and kind. She was a nurturer. She was a proud sister, daughter, an auntie, niece, friend, and cousin to so many. Words cannot express the devastating impact of this loss on all of us. The world is a little less bright today because she's gone. Jackie, we will love and miss you for the rest of our days. CBS Boston also reached out to Jackie's landlord, who called her a, quote, great tenant, but they also say that Sean wasn't actually approved as a tenant on the lease. In a statement, Blue Sky Realty said, quote, we never received an application for him. He was not on any lease of ours, and we were never notified of a request to accept him as an additional tenant in the building. Our thoughts and prayers go out to Jacklyn's family and friends during this very difficult time. Well, this is a tragic case all around, but what sets it apart from everything else we cover here on Law and Crime is the defendant's reaction in the courtroom. So to take a closer look at that, we're joined now by CBS Boston reporter Louisa Moller, who is actually in the courtroom. Louisa, thank you for coming on Scandal with us today. It's great to see you. And I have to ask, I know that you've worked in Boston for more than a decade. You've been in and out of courtrooms. Have you ever seen something like this before with the defendant crying?
Well, Sierra, firstly, thank you for having me. It's tough to go back into the files of 11 years, but I can certainly tell you that this was a very unique experience. We don't often see a defendant showing any emotional display because for the most part, their defense wouldn't want them to, and court officers and the judge wouldn't want them to. But in this particular instance, we had a defendant, Sean Brewer, who as soon as he entered the courtroom was immediately emotional. He clearly walked in with his face sort of contorted, like he was holding back tears. And then as the arraignment went on, which, is a very routine thing. And, arraignment, this is the first step as you enter into a criminal case. We first saw tears rolling down his face. At a certain point, he sort of put his head in his arm and lay it on a banister in the lockup area of the courtroom. And then we heard audible sobs. And so at no point did the court officer ask him to stop, or his defense attorney. And it just seemed like we tried to keep things going. But he cried throughout the entire ordeal, which was unique and heartbreaking.
Yeah, we actually have the video that we played a couple of the sound bites throughout this episode. And it's interesting that you pointed out they didn't say anything to stop it, because at times, the judge and the attorneys are just talking about logistics, honestly. Like, okay, here's when the next hearing would be. Here we're talking about bail, and you can hear him kind of sobbing over what they're talking about. And I guess from your reaction there, I mean, our viewers can make up their minds when they watch the sound bites and see what they think. But your reaction in the courtroom, do you think that it was genuine?
That's tough to say. It certainly, it seemed genuine. He had actual tears rolling down his face. From my perspective in the gallery, just to be clear, the courtroom's split into sort of pew style seating to the left and to the right. And mine was directly on the same side as where he was being held. So I could more so hear the sobs, and then when I looked at the video after the fact, could see the tears rolling down his face. But I do think that, again, outbursts are typically frowned upon in court, and if it was something that had seemed feigned or acted, I would imagine that typically someone would intervene, either the court officer or the judge, to ask for some sort of order in the court, and in this case they did not.
Yeah, and that's something our viewers would be super familiar with, because we have these episodes here on Law and Crime where it's like top 15 courtroom outbursts, and you hear the judges say, you got to keep it together. I mean, this is a court of law, and that's not really what we saw here. So I do kind of tend to agree with you that likely it was legitimate that he really had these feelings. And I guess that kind of goes into the allegations against him here, because on Law and Crime on Scandal, I cover, murder for hire, poisoned the husband, these love triangles that ended with, 100 stab wounds. That isn't what is happening here, right? Because he's alleged to have committed manslaughter, not first-degree murder.
Yes. So this is an extremely unique case where, and this is also a unique experience for me, where the prosecution and the defense don't seem to disagree on the facts. So the facts as they were described in court are that Sunday morning he is at his apartment in Winthrop with his new wife of only a couple weeks, when the prosecution says that he discovered a jacket that he was not familiar with in his apartment. And inside that jacket was a handgun that he had never seen before. And according to the prosecutor, he picked up the handgun to then ask his wife, 47-year-old Jacklyn Berry, where it came from. And according to his description to the police, it just went off. And so that obviously would be considered a manslaughter charge, because there was they can't prove intent to cause injury or harm to his wife. And, we can go deeper into this, but the police report supports these set of facts, because this is what he told them in an interview. The victim herself, Jacklyn Berry, was told police that she was shot by her husband, but that it was a quote unquote accident. And then if you go back and listen to the dispatch audio when they're first sending EMTs and police to the scene, in a 911 call, it sounds like Jacklyn Berry said that she was accidentally shot by her husband.
Okay, I wanted to ask about that because we got a lot of the information for this episode from your reporting, because of course you're right there in the courtroom, you've done the research, all of that. And one of the things in your article mentioned specifically that the defense attorney said, according to Jacklyn's last words, she corroborated that this was an accident. Did they go into any more detail about what her last words might have been?
So that was strictly via the defense attorney, Lorenzo Perez. And I should make it clear, another unique thing about this case is that parts of the case have been impounded by the court. Now, so we don't have a 100% crystal clear picture of exactly what happened inside that apartment. We were able to get access to the police report, which, is sort of a narrative, a broad narrative. It's not extremely detailed about what happened. But the defense attorney said that some of her last words were, "My husband shot me. This was an accident." And I'm paraphrasing here. But again, the state police in their police report corroborate that statement, that she said it was an accident. And according to 911 calls, it sounds again like she was one of the callers, that she may have actually gotten on the phone and said, "This was an accident. I was accidentally shot."
Oh, wow. And that's helpful for his defense too, because again, in the cases that we mostly cover here, it's first degree murder, premeditation. We're looking through text messages, was the husband searching, how to get away with murder or whatever. Like, for instance, the Brian Walsh case that I'm sure that you covered at WBZ, we saw a lot of incriminating searches there. It doesn't quite seem the same here. However, there is one thing that stood out to me just from being the host of a show, Scandal. The fact that he says he found this unknown jacket with an unknown gun in his home. And I'm thinking, was there an affair? Was it a man's jacket? Was it someone? Is there any indication of whose jacket it could have been?
Okay, so to be clear, no. And I expressly asked the defense attorney, he said he spent 2 hours with his client prior to arraignment. And I said, did he give you any indication of where this foreign clothing or foreign firearm came from? He said, he didn't say no, but he said that they are going through the facts, and at this point, an unknown person brought the items to their apartment. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that Sean Brewer is a convicted felon with a lengthy criminal record. He cannot have a license to carry a firearm because of his record. So it would be, I can get into motivations for having a firearm. I don't know. But what I do know is that he has had multiple other cases with, charges of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. And he's also been charged and convicted of armed robbery. And as a pending case for assault and battery on a police officer resisting arrest and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, all of which would prohibit him from having a firearm. So how that firearm got there and whether or not he had a knowledge of it being there and why it was there would be very important for this case.
Yeah, and you talked about this too. We heard it in the hearing from yesterday where they talked about, he's facing these other pending charges that are pretty serious allegations. He's been convicted. He has a rap sheet. And this is where things kind of get tricky because, prior bad acts can't always be used against a defendant. In this case, it might be irrelevant, the defense could argue. But on the other side of things, the prosecution could say, okay, does this go to show some sort of pattern that this man was violent? However, as you've pointed out, it's interesting that they both seem to agree. I believe the headline was something like the prosecutor said the gun spontaneously went off. So does it show that this man, had this premeditation, this lengthy rap sheet? Was this an accident? Whose gun was it? There's so many things that kind of go into it. And I guess in your experience here, the fact that he has these other charges, is that something you think could be considered? I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
I don't think that it'll go to intent in the manslaughter case because I don't think that they will be able to prove any sort of intent. I mean, if we even look at, again, if we go back to the fact that his wife is saying that she was shot accidentally, there was one spent shell casing, one gunshot wound to her abdomen. I mean, I'm not a state police homicide investigator, but it seems to support his narrative of the case. But what he's also additionally charged with possession of a firearm without a license and possession of ammunition without a license, and has this concurrent charge going on in Boston Municipal Court for assault and battery on a police officer, which is going to trial in, 2 weeks. So I think what you will find here is that it's likely prosecutors may not push too hard on the manslaughter charge, knowing that he's got this other case going on that will, could likely get him in prison time for a significant period of time. And maybe they would even wrap this in with a plea deal. So I don't think they would try to prove intent very hard because they have this concurrent case going on.
And I guess I have to ask too, because we have viewers who are from all over the country, all over the world. People know where Boston is, but is this an area where you see something like this happening? I mean, I think people have kind of in their minds these stereotypes of like The Town or The Departed or, you know, don't go to Southie. It isn't quite the same way that it used to be. I mean, but do you see things like this happening with his lengthy rap sheet? He's got this trial, all of these things. Is this something you would expect for that area of Boston?
So that's a really good question because he and his wife lived in Winthrop, technically not in the city of Boston. Winthrop is this beautiful, sort of historic, quaint town that is right on the Boston Harbor. It overlooks Logan Airport. Their apartment itself is a block from the water, basketball courts, and a really pretty playground right nearby. So Winthrop itself is not the kind of area where we would expect something like this to happen. And the other thing is the time of day when this took place. I mean, the 911 call came in at like 8:30 in the morning. Absolutely bizarre. You don't think about some sort of domestic incident or violent incident taking place on a Sunday morning, you know, on a holiday weekend. So no, Winthrop itself is not what one would consider gritty or crime ridden. But, you know, again, who knows what was going on with this couple? They had been married for a couple of weeks. And we did hear from her family that they described her as nothing but nurturing, kind, a sister, aunt, cousin. She had recently applied to get this apartment together. And, you know, even her realtors sent us a statement saying that she was sort of a phenomenal tenant, an upstanding citizen. So, you know, who knows whether or not maybe together as a couple, he was trying to straighten himself out or what. But then you have this tragic incident and it takes place in this little neighborhood nestled next to the harbor where you definitely wouldn't expect something like this to happen.
Yeah, and I think even in your reporting, you mentioned how he said he was getting ready for church and then found this, you know, unknown jacket and the firearm there, which again is strange. It's not like the other cases we cover here. It's seemingly he was getting ready for church, found this jacket, maybe the gun went off. I need to know whose jacket it was, whose gun it was, all of that. Those are questions that we still have. And I guess this is just kind of a speculation question as we're wrapping up for today. What are your thoughts? I know you mentioned a potential plea deal in this case. The reason that we're talking about it at the very least is because it does seem that he had true remorse for this. He's crying in court. If they had just gotten married, he likely loved this woman and, you know, wanted a life with her, and accidents do really happen. So I guess if you were going to surmise what you think would happen just based on your experience reporting in the Boston court system, what would you expect?
Well, I do know that he accepted a plea deal for an armed robbery charge in Cambridge, and given his rap sheet, he's got 25 or so cases just out of Boston Municipal Court. My best guess would be that a plea deal is what's going to take place going forward. Especially, I mean, he just has a firearm in his possession and he cannot have one, regardless of how it got there. So it seems like the evidence on that front is pretty strong. You have these two concurrent cases. He has a lengthy record. I don't see him going to take this to trial.
Yeah, I can kind of see that too. I mean, likely some sort of plea deal, but a case we're going to keep covering. And Louisa Moller, thank you for coming on with us and really giving us a look inside the courtroom, breaking down the case. You had great reporting on it, so thanks for coming and breaking it down.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sean Brewer is due back in court on July 15th for a probable cause hearing. And that is where today's episode of Scandal leaves us for now. If you like what you saw and you want to see more or connect with me on social media, you can find me on places like Instagram at Sierra Gillespie. Thanks for watching today's episode of Scandal. As always, I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie, and I'll see you next time.